Keep it in the car for when you have to hide bodies. And leave the full-size shovel at home. Solid logs. I have 5 of them on a shipping container. Won't stop them, but sure it will slow them until they are too old to care. I haven't stabbed anyone yet, but the dream is alive. And when I do, it will be with a quality tool like this. Blacker than my soul, but fair priced. What you just heard might sound like a sick joke to you. A dark Amazon review by someone who has a twisted sense of humor. Maybe someone trying to scare people or just seeking for attention. But what if I told you that the person who reviewed those tools wasn't a edgy teenager now? What if I told you that the review actually came from a real serial killer? Someone who used and reviewed those tools that he actually used for horrific crimes. This is not just another crime story. Welcome back to another Beauty and Crime Sunday with me, in which I do my skincare while I talk about the creepiest cases I have found this week. So if you like skincare and you also like horrific crimes, make sure to subscribe. Now let's get on with the story. In the state of Florida, United States, in the city of Fort Lauderdale, begins the story of one of the most chilling individuals we have encountered. As we have done in many other cases, I'm gonna start talking about the childhood of this individual and the crucial early signs of psychopathic behavior. So Todd Kohlhepp was marked by tragedy from the very start. I'm just gonna call him Todd because his surname it's impossible for me to say. So at just 2 years old, his parents separated. Todd stayed with his mother, and while some might expect a child to adjust, Todd's reaction was far from typical. This was the beginning of a path that would lead to horrors that no one would have predicted. 1 year after, Todd's mother actually remarried, but this new marriage would bring more turmoil into Todd's life. He had a deeply troubled relationship with his stepfather, one that would only worsen as time went by. And this conflict wasn't just about different personalities. From a very young age, Todd already had some signs of extreme aggression. We're talking about a child that is barely free at this point, who was already displaying some aggressive signs in daycare. Todd's behavior was so out of control that caregivers were forced to separate him from other children. He was aggressive, often hitting other kids, spitting and even biting the other kids at the daycare. This wasn't typical bad behavior for a child. This was something much darker, and Todd was just getting started. As Todd grew, his intensity and violent aggressions also grew, and what would follow would be even more disturbing. But for now, it's important to remember this. The roots of his future actions were planted in a childhood of instability, aggression, and a lack of empathy. His journey was about to take a horrible turn. They regularly had to separate him from other children since he spitted, bit on them, and also humiliate them. And I repeat, we are only talking about a little boy who is around 3 or 4 years old. He didn't have uncontrollable intemperate behavior. In addition to his terrible temper, he had tantrums all the time and attacked other children. And in all these child cases, we all know that they start to find fascination with also animal torture. So he couldn't be any different. That's another trait that he shared with many other psychopaths. He used his stepfather's rifle a couple times. He would steal it and he would go out to find some animals to torture. It could be rabbits, dogs, cats, squirrels, whatever he could find, honestly. Everything grows, and of course also the problems associated with him also grew. He was no longer the little weak boy. He started to grow into a larger, stronger person and started to have physical altercations, especially with his stepfather and other adults. To this whole cocktail of danger, we must add something that I haven't mentioned until now. And that is that from a very young age, he had a certain fixation with the sexual world. He began to make comments that weren't very nice, let's say. He would touch girls his age at least. He looked very weirdly at girls. He was basically a creep. He was also accompanied by foul language, and I repeat, inappropriate for a teenager, especially at that time. Perhaps now it's easier for many young children, thanks to the internet of course, to have access to all that adult content. But at that time it was not very common. And he had a very deep fixation for anything that was sexual. At 9 years old, his desperate mother and desperate stepfather took him to a psychiatric hospital just when he was 9, so imagine how bad it would be. And they did a couple analysis on him to really check what is wrong with this kid, I guess. Is it their fault? Is it the child's fault? What problems could he have? The psychiatrist was astonished. And to really give you an idea of how bad this was, how bad the situation was, when the visits ended with the psychiatrist, Todd was actually admitted to the psychiatric hospital for 3 months, and he's only 9. The psychiatrist defines Todd as a child with an explosive temper, with an unhealthy fixation on sex, and who could definitely have some certain sociopathic or psychopathic traits. But at that time it was very hard to really detect those signs on a child. So if he turned out to be a psychopath, he would continue to live with his mother and stepfather, and everything remained exactly the same. So he was actually, the psychiatrist said, okay, it's very probable that he is a psychopath, but we cannot 100% confirm since he's a 9-year-old child. But at the age of 12, Todd actually moved with his father. And for a very brief moment, it looked like things were improving. Todd behaved better, and the relationship with the father and Todd, it looked like it was moving in the right direction. This was something that Todd always wanted. His father's attention, his approval. But the peace was short-lived. His father was often absent. He was a womanizer, always away, juggling multiple relationships at the same time, leaving Todd feeling abandoned once again. Despite being physically under the same roof, Todd was every day alone. His father's absence left him with the feeling of isolation, and his mind began to drift into a much darker path, with more dangerous thoughts. The anger, the frustration, it all started to build up in his head again. So at just 15 years old, his behavior would escalate again, in a way that would shock also the most seasoned investigators. His first major crime would leave a scar on his soul, and really the lives of others. Listen closely, because this is the part where everything takes a turn for the worse. Todd, at 15, he did the unthinkable. Armed with a gun, he kidnapped a 14-year-old girl. He forced her into a warehouse, tied her up, and subjected her to horrific torture of unspeakable horrors. The terror he instilled in her wasn't only physical, it was also psychological. He threatened her with a gun, promising to shoot her if she ever told anyone about what happened. He wasn't just threatening her. He threatened to kill her whole family if she ever spoke out. So not just her, the whole family. Luckily, the girl did the brave thing. Despite her fear, she really went to the authorities. And Todd did not have the chance to really silence her. He was arrested before he could do any more damage. But this wasn't just a man who only made threats, no. If he really had the chance, he would have followed through. The police had no idea just how dangerous he actually was. Todd's actions landed him a 50-year sentence. Some might argue that it wasn't enough for the gravity of the situation, but the judge's wording was a little chilling. He described Todd as a very intelligent man. Well, a very intelligent kid, but also very dangerous. He went on to say that Todd's rehabilitation was out of the question, that no professional treatment would ever fix him. The only way to control someone like him was just to lock him up. So honestly, I agree with the judge, but since he didn't really kill anyone and stuff, he could only give him a 15-year sentence, which is too low, I guess, for what he's about to do later. So at just 15 years old, Todd entered the prison system where he would spend years behind bars. Though, as we will see, that wouldn't really stop his darkness from growing. But even in prison, Todd's story was far from over. During the prison, Todd actually learned to keep his impulses down. Many of you may have expected him to be a ticking time bomb, always getting into fights, always on the edge. Me also, I thought the same thing. Maybe even capable of killing someone inside the prison. And while there was occasional bursts of violence, none of them were severe enough to actually make his sentence longer. In fact, he was released just 1 year before he turned 30. By the time Todd left prison, he was a registered sex offender. But did this stop him? No. In fact, it seemed to be the beginning of a new chapter for him. He moved to South Carolina, where, to everyone's surprise, me included, he built a successful career. Todd, the man who once terrorized his victims, now had a new identity, one that seemed almost too good to be true. He got his real estate license, and at the peak of the housing bubble, he found a specific niche. If you were charming, if you really knew how to sell, the sky was the limit, I guess. Todd turned out to be a very good real estate agent, probably because of his charismatic persona he built during his years in prison. Or maybe it was his natural charisma. But either way, he was able to weave a mask so convincing that people could not see the monster beneath it. And like that, his real estate business flourished. But Todd did not stop there, obviously. If not, we wouldn't be talking about this case. He went on to earn a degree in business administration and started hiring different employees and also acquired multiple properties. He even became, and this is very random, a licensed private pilot. To the outside world, it seemed like Todd was on his way to a successful career and even having an admirable life. Was this the redemption story of a troubled teenager who had finally turned his life around? The answer, my friends, is no, because if not, why would we be talking about this case? You're on the wrong channel if you're expecting a happy ending, because what we will uncover later on is that Todd, despite his very polished exterior, was still the same monster inside. He may have learned how to blend in, to hide his darkness behind a facade of charm and success. But that didn't really change the reality of who he was. And soon he would commit his first murder. Many serial killers say that Obviously, their first kill was the one that made them more scared because it's their first one. The one that they approach with the most fear. But Todd was not like them, no. His first murder would only solidify the horrifying truth. This was a man who always had been a predator, and he was now fully ready to hunt again. Of course, Todd's story did not end up with that facade of a perfect successful man. His first deadly crime, one that would forever mark him as a monster, happened November 6, 2003. It wasn't really premeditated, but the trigger was also very familiar for Todd. Todd was simply trying to sell his motorcycle at Superbike Motorsports. But when he arrived, he felt disrespected, as if the staff were mocking him, laughing behind his back, making fun of his riding skills. He felt obviously humiliated, not treated the way he thought he deserved. Without saying a word, he just left. But obviously the rage was building inside him. Because as I told you before, he had a very aggressive, explosive temper, so he was just building it in. So he left the shop, took the bike, and after some time, he returned. This time, he wasn't really coming back to negotiate. This time, he had a gun. He killed everyone in that shop. The mechanic, the manager, the owner, and even the owner's mom. 4 innocent lives taken out with cold precision, all for the sin of making him feel disrespected. Most of them were in their 30s, except for the owner's mother, who was in the early 50s. Todd's first murder wasn't really one single life lost. It was a quadruple homicide, all because he couldn't really stand being ridiculed. This was not really an accident. This was a calculated act of rage. And just like that, the hell that Todd had been living in just spilled over. His mask had cracked, and the monster inside him had finally unleashed. But now let's fast forward to 2015, a full 12 years after that horrifying day. In those years, Todd was not caught, and on the surface it seemed like he moved on from his very violent past. But what if I told you that in those 12 years he had many more victims, far more lives lost, and we don't really even know the true extent of his killings? I'm gonna tell you the theories, which are very chilling, since things are about to get even darker. And Todd wasn't now just even killing out of anger. No, this was even more sinister. Something fueled by pleasure, pure, twisted satisfaction. We're gonna meet Joni Jo Coxey and Megan McQueer Coxey, a couple in their late 20s, living their lives until they cross paths with Todd. For reasons unknown to most, they became Todd's next victims. A couple out of dinner, enjoying a quiet evening, became pawns in this horrific crime that I'm gonna talk to you about. Now, let's be clear. Todd wasn't just a man out of control. He was a predator, a calculated man in his cruelty. He wasn't killing just out of fury. This was for his sick own enjoyment. The couple was tortured, abused, and eventually murdered. And here is the chilling part. Todd didn't just do this just for killing. This was about the thrill he felt, a crime of bias, not really rage. To those who actually worked with them, Todd had always been an open book, an unsettling one, but he was the guy who would make you cringe with his rude jokes, especially around women, waitresses, bartenders. Anyone working at a restaurant or a bar would cringe at his horrific comments. And I feel like we all know someone like this that feels terrible about women and makes very rude jokes that you just kind of laugh and after run away. So he was one of them. At the different bars or restaurants, they would would even rotate shifts just to avoid this man. Because let's face it, nobody actually wanted to be the next victim of his rude comments and his sexually charged remarks. But you know what they sometimes say. Sometimes monsters hide in plain sight. And in Todd's case, his hideous side was lurking behind a normal everyday exterior. He could really charm you in 1 minute, but the next minute he could make you feel like the most disgusting person. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. You are probably thinking, but why is this video called The Amazon Killer, right? Let me connect the dots with you, because now I'm gonna start. Why is it called like that? Todd continued his killing spree. He wasn't just murdering people. No, he was also shopping on Amazon, like everyone does. But what was he buying exactly? Under the name of Mediheal, okay, Todd started buying tools for his horrific crimes. And wait for it, if that wasn't bad enough, he was also leaving reviews. He was leaving feedback on products, like he was just another normal shopper. But as I said before in the first part of the video, this wasn't just normal reviews. These were chilling descriptions of how he used the tools to commit those horrific crimes. And I feel like if that was me, if I would be, I don't know, buying a shovel or whatever, and I saw that review, I would probably laugh at it because I would think that it was a joke. But I guess I have to think about it twice now, what people are putting on the internet. One review read something like this: more black than my soul, but it works. And when he reviewed different locks that he used to lock and hide his victims in, he described how magnificent they were for securing a container. 5 locks on a single container. He wasn't joking. He wasn't really being ironic. He was literally telling the people and telling the world how he used Amazon to torture and dispose of victims. Yes, Todd wasn't just a normal killer, I guess. He was a man who used the very tools of modern convenience to fuel his nightmarish reality. And as we will see in this final chilling part of the story, the last of his confirmed murders is something that will leave you speechless. It's all just a horrifying twist of fate. August 2016, delightful summer, a time when the sun is still out, the barbecues are lit, and the last thing you would think of is that you would be trapped in a deadly game you didn't even know you were playing. This kind of sounds like the movie Saw. Enter Kyla Brown and her boyfriend, Charles David Carver. They were just doing what any other good worker would do. They were hired by Todd to clean and maintain his property. What they didn't know was that this property wasn't just in disrepair. It was really a death trap. So on August 22, they ended up disappearing, vanishing without a trace. And Todd, a very, I guess, efficient psychopath, had them locked up in a shipping container, the kind you would find on a dock, I guess, stacked next to crates and other goods. But this wasn't really a place of goods. It was a prison. And Kayla and Charles, they were really treated like dogs. Or maybe not dogs, even worse. Collars, chains, humiliation, abuse. You name it, he did it. Charles was shot instantly, but Kayla, for a time, Todd turned her into his personal grotesque plaything, I guess. It was a nightmare that would only scar anyone for life. And here is where it gets interesting, I guess, in a creepy way. Something amazing happened. Kayla's family doesn't just sit around and wait. They alert the authorities instantly. The police, using the magic of technology, the cell phone triangulation, They pinpointed the exact location where she and Charles were being held. They tracked the signals down, and the next thing you know, they're breaking through the locks, opening the shipping container, and let me tell you, what they found was more horrifying than what you could really imagine. It wasn't gore for the sake of gore. Nah, it was a haunting, jarring image. A woman with a dark color around her neck, pale, broken, a visual so chilling, so unsettling, that you can really feel the weight of her suffering just by looking at it. This wasn't just an image of violence. It was an image of true, pure, unraveling despair. Now, Todd, he didn't really handle things very gracefully. At first, he denied everything. Classic move. But we all know how these stories go. After a while, he actually cracked and confessed. And when it came to the trial, the evidence was obviously so undeniable, so crushing that Todd did not really stand a chance. 7 life sentences, no chance of parole. It was like a straight up death sentence. But here's the thing that gets under my skin. 12 years. 12 years between Todd's first murder and this one. Now, just most serial killers don't take that type of vacation unless they have something else going on. A mask so perfect, I guess, that you wouldn't even think that he's back into his old ways. 12 years of hiding, only to come back with a vengeance? Isn't that odd? It's like he planned it, laying low, letting the world forget about it until the urge came back. And remember, this guy, this monster, had been torturing animals from a very young age. He didn't really just snap, he enjoyed it. And to make things even worse, disturbing, I guess, could you guess what he did behind bars? He sent a letter to the newspaper claiming he had been killing people since he was a teenager. Oh, and that the police would never find all his victims. His words, "You don't have enough fingers to count them all." The chilling audacity of this man. He wasn't just saying it, he was bragging about it. And don't even get me started on Amazon. Todd didn't just use Amazon for his tools. He reviewed them, as I said before, commenting on locks, chains, and tools like he was shopping for a new power drill. But no, he was buying things for his new crimes, making reviews that literally gave clues to the police. So if you are wondering how technology is being used by modern killers, well, Todd's Amazon's account might just be the textbook example. Just goes to show, in today's world, isn't just criminals on the streets we need to really be worrying about, I guess. It's the ones in our shopping carts too. As we close the chapter on this chilling story, we are left to ponder how much of a monster can someone really become before they really show their true face. Todd, the so-called Amazon killer, wasn't really just a product of the environment. He was a product of calculated evil, hiding behind the charming smiles and a very well-groomed exterior. His reign of terror spawned for years and under the radar until finally his twisted desires resurfaced in a way that left a trail of victims and a very chilling legacy. The Amazon reviews, the tools, the lock-picking expertise. It's something like a horror movie. As I said, it really reminds me like the Saw movies. But unfortunately, in this case, it was real life, real pain, real destruction. Now, with 7 life sentences, Todd obviously remains behind bars. His twisted legacy immortalized just not in headlines, but in the very technology we trust every day. So next time you are shopping online, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the scariest things are not lurking in the shadows or in the darkness. They are the ones we invite into our house with just one click. And remember, justice might be blind, but it really has a long memory, just as Todd, I guess. Because no matter how far you run or how well you hide under a mask, the truth has a way of finding you. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and never forget some monsters wear the mask of a man. So thank you for watching, and remember, do your skincare, and if you don't end up like a glazed donut at the end of it, you're not doing it right. Bye bye.